I want to thank you for joining us today, and I want to apologize for last week's webinar, which we had to cancel at the last minute. We thought we knew how to do fast browser forms. A lot of customers contact us with forms that are slow, and we always help them to improve their performance. Now, before we get started, I just want to tell you kind of what my expectations are with browser-based forms. And that's what we're talking about today. It's part one. It's going to be a multi-part series. There's still a lot to tell you about the browser forms. And let's just do a quick audio check again. If you can hear me and you can raise your hand, that would be great. I'm the only one doing the webinar this morning. Thanks again, Mark. And we have a good turnout today, so I want to welcome you all to this webinar. And like I said a moment ago, we get contacted from customers to help them with their performance. We typically expect a browser form to open in 3 to 5 seconds or better. That's the load time. We expect to be able to query lists, libraries from SharePoint InfoPath forms. In other words, when you're in the form, we don't expect there to be latency. You can tab between fields in less than a second. And when you submit the form, we expect it to take no longer than about 10 seconds, although submitting can take a little bit longer. It's not as painful as when they're in the form filling it out or when they're loading the form for the first time. So our expectations for browser-based forms are 3 to 5 seconds max to load, imperceptible tab performance. In other words, it performs very well. There's less than a half a second or so lag between tabbing between fields. And then probably about 10 seconds on the submit. Now, in your form, you could have some logic sometimes when it has to post back to the server. And those times you may experience another 3 to 5 second lag potentially. So that's the kind of the expectation. All cloud processes can tend to be a little bit slow and sluggish at times. Our expectation for forms and what we achieve on a regular basis is, like I said, better than 3 to 5 second load time. Tabbing between fields is almost instantaneous, and the submit times don't take longer than 10 seconds. So if your form is not behaving like that, there's a bunch of reasons why, and I'm going to talk about one today. In fact, I'm going to specifically talk about querying lists because it affects on-load performance, and it can also affect performance when you're filling out the form. Now, this is the first of a multi-part series. Well, why am I doing part one here? We thought we knew what the best practices were last week and before that because we've helped so many people, and we have successfully improved forms with those techniques. So I thought last week's webinar would be a piece of cake. And I went off and I thought, well, I'm going to do something different now. I'm going to create a form from scratch, and I'm going to add things, and I'm going to see how the performance degrades when I add these things that I know are bad. For example, a very large list. So I went ahead and I added this super big list. Well, it wasn't super big. I'll show it to you in a second. 1,500 items. And it didn't cause any performance problems. And so I was in a bit of a dilemma last week because I thought that I started losing confidence in what I was doing. And that's why I canceled the webinar. But thankfully today I've figured it out, and we'll talk more about this. So our webinar agenda is really to focus on large lists. We're going to talk more about in-form browser performance probably next week or the following week. But today I want to just focus on this one thing because it actually, we should talk about it, and that is large lists. And there's 3 ways to do it, and there's only one that works. So I'm going to show you 3 demos. This will be a very quick webinar today, hopefully. Well, it'll be 20 minutes or less, but I'm going to shoot for 10, 15 minutes. And we'll talk about the key takeaways. We see a lot of people moving to lists, and they're moving to SharePoint lists data because the SharePoint lists can be like a database. So you have a bunch of different lists, and they're connected to one another, and you can quickly export them to Excel to get some intel, some analytics on your data. And so we see a lot of people that want to take their InfoPath forms and map the data to lists so they can access it via Excel, do pivots and things like that. Very, very common request. And they don't have SQL. So the problem here is that the lists don't scale like the SQL database will. Now we have tools that will help you get the data into lists. So you have small data sets, no problem. But what happens when you have a large data set? Well, it can fail, and it can fail in a couple different ways, and I'm going to show you those in a second. But there's a way to fix it. Okay, so let's take a look at demo number 1 here. I've got a list that has 1,592 items in it, and actually going to go to demo number 1. So this form is pulling from one of my lists. So in SharePoint I have a list called numbers, and this list, as you can see here, has 1,592 items. Now let's take a look at this list for a second, because I want to show you what this list looks like. Now this list is just one column, right? Some of you may already be thinking something. Okay, so let's take a look at how this performs. I'm just going to go back to my quick demo here from last week that opens a form. Now this form has a drop down in it. The drop down has nothing in it, and what I want to do is show you what happens when I load every single one of those items from the numbers list. Are you ready? Start your stopwatch. Here we go. And it's already done. I got to press the button here. There it is. It's already done. Less than, I want to say, maybe a fifth of a second. So we were able to load 1,500 items into my drop-down in InfoPath browser forms in a fraction of a second, right? Crazy, right? So why is that so fast? Well, it turns out it has to do with the amount of data. And this is actually really critical. So if your list has one column, it doesn't have a lot of data in it. It's 1,500 items, and there's a couple bytes or whatever, maybe 2 or 3 bytes per item. If it's a Unicode, maybe it's 3 or 4 bytes. And that's not a lot of data. I mean, that's probably less than 100 KB of data. So let's go back to this slide for a second. So that's the reason. The reason why your lists are slow isn't because of the number of items. It's because of the size of the list that you're querying. And this is a really key takeaway. And it suggests a couple different ways to fix the problem. Now let's look at a list that actually loads slowly. So we're going to show we just showed the first demo, a couple thousand items, not a problem because there's only one column. Now let's take a look at a list that has 10 columns and see what happens. And so I have let's see here, I've got book data 2. Now this list has 13 columns, I believe, and this is a list of public information from one of our customers. Is a library, and they have book information. They do book preservation, so they've got lots and lots of different information on books. And so this is basically a dump of all that information. You can see the call number, the barcode, and so on. Now, this list has a bunch of items in it. Let's take a look. So we're going to take a look at the list settings here. And I think I already have this open somewhere, but let's see if I can click on this list settings here. Okay. And you can see that it has 7,455 items. And you can see the little warning from Microsoft, which we'll talk about in a second. The threshold is 5,000, right? And if your list exceeds 5,000 items, you may be prohibited from querying it. And then there's this link to learn about how to do it. So let's see if we can do this here. So I'm just going to try to load this, and of course I can't. That's the point. If I try to load a new form here by clicking on new item, not new item, I'm sorry. I need to go to the demo for this item. So if I go to the demo for this item here, so this is pulling from the same list. So it's going to, the second demo in this form is going to try to open up those items, and it's going to basically show an error. It's going to say can't do it, and it's going to say that's an interesting error. That's not the error I expected. So let's refresh it and try again. I think it's because I didn't have I didn't refresh the session. So it's giving us this error. It's saying that the attempted operation is prohibited because it exceeds the list view threshold. So you may have seen this before. So that's what happens. It quickly errors out. It says no go. And so what you may be thinking is, well, wait a minute. I've got REST. SharePoint is just a REST web service, right? I can use REST, R-E-S-T, web services to query the list, and I can filter it. So here I have my second part of this demo is to query the list using REST. Let's see if that works. Once again, doesn't work. It's too slow, basically, and it won't actually allow us to even query it to get the REST schema. So the XML data from the REST schema isn't even returned. And that's actually pretty shocking because one of the benefits of REST is the ability to filter. And it's telling us here that even with the filter set to just return the top one item, because the list is over 5,000, SharePoint refuses to give me the schema for that item. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. I'm going to show you how it works in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about those two approaches. So first off, if the list is not indexed, it will be very slow, and so you need to index it. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is as we saw there in the list, if you have more than 5,000 items, it's going to fail. There's this link. You can click on the link, and when you do, you'll get this link to Microsoft's article, and it's going to tell you how to index the column. It's very easy to do. So here are the errors you get. And to index the column, you can do, you basically go into your list, and here is where's our list? I want to go back to our list, book data 2. And this is not indexed. So what you would do is you would go in here into list settings, and it's very easy to do this. You just go in here to create an index. Now this list does not have any index columns. When you do add the index, you'll see that index column appears. Let's take a look at another list where we have indexed it. Same number of items. And we'll take a look at the settings for this list. And you'll see that we have one item indexed. Actually, I need to click on index columns to go there. One item is indexed, and that's item ID. So that's the first thing that you need to do is for these large lists over 5,000 items, you can still query them, but you need to make sure you index first, and then you'll get away from that issue. So if you see that error in your list, it's not the end of the world. You can index them to get around that. The other technique that you need to do is you need to actually set the query parameter for the query. And I'll show you how that works in a second. Let's see here. I want to show you. Yeah, so this is an example of a list that queries 1,969 items, not quite 5,000. Let's see here. Maybe I get the wrong site here. So this is an example of a list that is querying about 2,000 items, and you can see that it's cascading. So the first technique to make this performant, and I need to start over because this session is old. Let me just try this again. Okay, so here's a form that queries a 2,000 items list, and this is showing quick in-form performance. Now there's 2,000 items that are queried, all of them, right? And it's very fast to basically do it, and that's because we're not querying all the information. We're only querying the information that equals the previous drop-down. So if we select a drop-down here, it's going to filter the items after it. And this is a great technique, and you can see here, very performant. So you don't have to load all the data in to your form. You just load in what you want. And the way we do this is when this value changes, we set the query parameter for the form to be equal to that value, and then we query the second column. So we have another data connection that queries this MFHD ID, where the location is equal to SML. Very easy to do this. In your rule, you set the query parameter value equal to SML, and then you do the query. and then it filters it. This only works for equivalence, so you can't do a contains or, hey, give me all of the values where the location looks like this. You have to do it exact match. And so that's a bit of a nuisance. It would be nice if we could use REST for these large queries, but as you saw, if the list size is super big, the REST query will fail on load. Now let's take a look at, so that's that. So once again, with large lists, you want to do two things. You want to index your list, and you want to use that query filter. So let's take a look at that query filter. We'll build a form from scratch here that does that. So in InfoPath 2010, you'll create a form. What am I doing here? I don't want the filler. I want the designer. Blank browser form, and this works fine to publish your 2010 forms to 365, even though it's 2013. I like to use this because I know a lot of our customers are still on 2010, although it's dwindling by the days. So what we'll do here is we'll add a data connection to that list. Just receive data connection to that SharePoint list or library, and we'll go and get that link to that really large list, the 7,455 one, and I think it's this one here. So the first thing is you have to index it. We'll go back to the list. And we'll get the list URL, and I like to just go into the list settings or the library settings to get those because they give you a nice link here to the web address. And as you know, we just copy that in here. If you don't remember your password, it automatically times out after about 10 minutes, which is a bit of a nuisance for 365. Let's see if I can remember my password here. Let me try this one more time here. Didn't expect to have to do that. Okay, so connected to the list is fine. We want book data 2. We actually want the index one. And let's just get a bunch of information here. You can see those are our 13 columns. And the key thing here is don't click automatically retrieve on open because there's no index set. There's no query filter set at that time. So it will fail because it's going to try to load everything in. So what you want to do then is you want to, like let's say we want to add a button to the form. And actually, let's just drag the information over. So we're going to just drag the results over into a repeating table. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a filter, which is, we're going to say query items. And our filter will be to set location equal to something. So what you can do is you can just drag this location field into your view. It's a secondary data source. But that's fine. And then when it changes, what we'll do is we'll add a rule that automatically queries the data connection. And then we don't have to worry about setting it because by changing it in the view, it'll automatically set it. Okay, so there we go. Let's preview it. I think the value was SML. It's going to query the server. It's going to get the results. Now it's going to ask me my password again. And I've typed in wrong again. Hold on. And is it going to work? Did not work. Let's try this again. I'm going to show in the browser. The preview is not really what I want. I'm not really that interested in the preview because we want to see how this works in the browser. Okay, we'll give it our site. We don't want lists, but it should get the right site there. Okay, with any luck here, we'll publish this out and we'll open it up and we'll see this working then in the browser. And the key thing there is, like I said, is you want to set that one of those fields in that secondary query fields database and then query the data connection. And that's going to allow you to, now we're still getting an error. And it's showing me maybe I'm querying the wrong list. So once again, you have to make sure you're querying the right list, otherwise it won't work. And but the technique is to go in and set the query value before you query the items, and then it will filter down the results, and you won't get a huge amount back. I'll try to get that working in a second. So the third demo then is this demo that I showed earlier. I showed the first two pieces of it. Let's see if the so this the third part of this demo is exactly that. It's setting exactly one item, returning the one record from the SML location, and you can see how fast that was. So even though it's querying a list of 7,455 items, returns relatively quickly. Now you can also return 100 items or 200 items. It doesn't have to be one item, because that's also going to be a small set of data. And it really has to do, once again, with the amount of data that you're returning, and that's the key thing that determines how fast it will work. Now, for those of you who have your own on-prem, I'll get a question here. A couple questions. One from Sandra. Should you index the list even if you expect that it will never go over 5,000? Yes, that's a great question. You should index it even if it's going to be 1,000 to 2,000, because that will improve performance. So that's a great question. And then another question from Rion. With indexing large lists, is it better to have more indexes, or do the performance benefits top out after having one column index? Really depends on which item you're going to be querying, in other words, filtering. So you want to index the item that you're going to be querying, right? So you could index all columns, you know, it will just add to the SharePoint SQL storage. So if you're going to be querying, like let's say you have a cascading drop-down and you have field 1, field 2, field 3, and field 2 is a child of field 1, you know, in other words, there's a relationship, you know, one list, next list, and so on. In those cases, you want to index anything that you're going to be querying on. So that's a great question from Rian. Question from Durga Prasad. We cannot find InfoPath in the new Office 365, right? Which version of 365 do you have? Because it is there, and it is installable. Some people think it's not there, but the right option for 365 is, there's two things. One is you can do SharePoint Online, and you just have to get the P2 plan, which includes InfoPath Form Services, but not the client download. So you have to have your own version of InfoPath to design the forms. You design the forms, you put them up on 365, your customers can use them, your users can use them. The other option is to use E3, which is the Office 365 rich client. You get Office clients, you can download InfoPath Filler, InfoPath Designer, and Word, and those are still available. We just had a site we created last week. So you keep wondering what's going to happen with InfoPath, but the truth is that Microsoft is shipping InfoPath again in SharePoint 2016. They're shipping the form services piece. So they're going to reset the sunset date. And I mentioned this a couple weeks ago in a talk I did. InfoPath is still the best technology out there in terms of value. There's nothing else that comes close to it in terms of ease of forms design. But we expect that to change in the years ahead, just like we expect SharePoint to change. But right now, you know, don't have to worry about SharePoint InfoPath support going away. It's there for many, many years. And another question here from okay, thank you, Durga. I guess that helped you. Okay, so lastly, if you're not on 365, you have your own SharePoint server, you can actually get away from this 5,000 thing. So you don't have to be limited to the 5,000 the items or the whatever it is that is, and I said earlier, remember, that it's not the number of items in the list, it's the size of the amount of data returned, which was confusing to me. Now, here is what happens when you go into SharePoint Central Admin. You'll see this screen, and there's two things to look at here. One is the data connection response size. And notice that it defaults to 10 megabytes. Actually, that's not the default. But yours will say something like, whatever it is, you can extend this. So you can make this larger, and those large sets of data will still load into your form. Now, that's not a good practice because it's going to take a lot of time, and there's a good reason why they have this set where they do. So once again, index your forms and use filters on your queries, and you'll be fine. The other thing you might want to look at here is the connection timeout. So if you do have a form, for whatever reason, you absolutely have to load everything in on load, and it's taking more than 30 seconds, the default here for the timeout is 30,000 milliseconds, which is 30 seconds. You can see ours is set to 60,000, so we've doubled it, just like we've increased the size for the response size. You can do this. You can just go in, if you're a central admin, you have SharePoint on-prem, you can go and change it. And you don't have to be limited to the default 5,000 items for SharePoint Online 365. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the quick demo. So next week, I do want to continue this discussion. We're going to talk about what makes forms fast when you're filling them out. Obviously, this is part of the puzzle if you've got a cascading drop-down or you're querying something in the form. You can get this. We'll upload it to YouTube. Next week, we'll talk about bad view and logic and how you get the performance not so good if you have a bad view design. And this is something that's a little more obvious than the list thing was. I want to thank you for coming today and for your patience with these webinars. We're trying to provide some value to you, and we look forward to your feedback. Quick 5 minutes, five question check at the end here. If you have a moment, just answer our questions. They're very easy. We're not going to ask you to solve world hunger or anything. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's rainy in Seattle. I hope it's nice where you're at. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much.